This is Rachel Higgins, and this is my Chapter 3 Nurture Shock presentation. In Chapter 3, entitled Why White Parents Don't Talk About Race, it emphasizes the importance of discussing how race at an early age in children's lives is important. The beginning quote asks, "Does teaching children about race and skin color make them better or worse off?" At the Children's Research Lab at the University of Texas, a study was conducted of 100 families who were white with a child between the ages of 5 and 7 years old. This study was conducted by a PhD dissertation student named Brigitte Winthrop under the advisement of Dr. Rebecca Bigler. The 200 families were divided into 3 groups. One group was given a video of a multicultural show. The other was given the same video, and was told the parents that they needed to have a discussion of race. And then the third group was told to simply have a discussion of race with no video provided. The racial attitudes that were tested at the beginning of this experiment did not improve, as the discussions that the parents had with their children about race did not go into enough depth, as parents would vaguely state things like, "everybody's equal." Rebecca Bigler ran an experiment in 3 preschool classrooms where students were divided into 2 groups. One wore red shirts and one wore blue shirts. The kids played freely at recess, and they didn't divide into their own colors. They found that the reds never showed hatred for the blues, but have a preference for their own personal color. For example, it was like stating, "Blues are fine, but not as good as us." When the reds were asked how many reds were nice, they'd answer, "all of us." When the blues were asked who were nice, they'd answer, "some." Some of the blues were mean, and some were dumb, but not the reds. In conclusion, it found that children would use whatever you give them to create divisions, as stated by Rebecca Bigler. Kids are developmentally prone to in-group favoritism and identifying themselves with somebody who closely resembles them. In a third experiment, Dr. Phyllis Katz took 100 black and 100 white children and observed them for the first 6 years of their lives. In her first study, she took 6-month-old babies and had them stare at pictures of different races of people. She would conclude that the babies would stare longer at faces that were not of their own race, as it was unfamiliar to them. At 3 years old, the children were asked to point to who you would want to be friends with, and 80% of white children chose a white person. At 5 years old, 63% of these 200 kids categorized a deck of cards into races. In addition, there was this division of 6 kids into eight groups. There was division of 8 groups consisting of 8 kids ethnically diverse, who would then individually learn a lesson and teach it to their groups. They would observe their play at recess, and they would play with more ethnically diverse kids in the first grade more so than in 3rd grade, thus defining the idea that there is a developmental window to teach diversity. Dr. Phyllis Katz states, "When we imagine it's most important to not talk about race, is the very developmental periods when children's minds are forming their first conclusions about race." Dr. Jean Jackson from Ohio State observed 2 classrooms for 1 year. During Christmas, the students of these first grade classes was read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which depicted a black Santa. The children were in disbelief and couldn't fathom that this could be true. Then a black man in a Santa costume visited the classrooms, and they were convinced. And even though following this, they still drew white Santas, the door was opened for the year to have discussions regarding race. In conclusion, it is important to talk to your kids about race at an early age, as they already have preconceived notions that are developmentally implanted into their development. It is shown that there is a developmental window, and that after a certain age it is hard to change these. As a social worker, it is important to know in working with parents and with kids, in teaching them these findings and studies to better improve racial opinions of others, and as well as just overall having a better understanding. Thank you.